Kirana is joining us on leg one, sailing out of Plymouth next week, and is bursary participant that the International Maritime Organization have funded. So we're very excited to have her aboard. Joining us from, you can tell us where you're from, but just outside Jakarta is how I kind of reference it in the world. And I'm going to pass over. She's going to just do a little bit an introduction, chat about a few slides, and then we're going to come to the panel. Over to you, Kirana.
Hi, everyone. Hi, maybe this. Okay. Hi, my name is Kirana, and I'm from Indonesia, as Emily has mentioned. And I'm from Bandung, 2 hours from the capitals. But I moved around to different islands in Indonesia before. And today, I would like to share some of my latest dissertation research related Indonesian as a plastic nation, which we'll see. Should I just? Okay, so as you all can see, this is an Indonesian map. I took this from the CIA website. Yes, Indonesia is the largest archipelagic island. We have 18,000 islands, huge. And then when now, our country claimed as the second largest marine debris polluters. But let's see the map. We are so huge, as big as the United States. This from Aceh to Papua. Yeah. And we have also, when we talk about the plastic issue within the Indonesia geographic context, I think it's also interesting to see, having a background in marine science, when our country was claimed as the second largest marine debris polluter, I was thinking there must be scientific reason, and see, Indonesia has it's called Indonesian Ocean Through Flow, where it's a very unique ocean currents that intersection between Pacific Ocean and Indian Ocean, and take 90% of plastic waste, and it will go through the Indonesian water. So that's an interesting point that I was thinking, that we are maybe not the second largest marine debris polluters, but also one of the biggest storage for the marine debris. Yeah, and then this is another map that I think is quite interesting. It's from World Bank. So there are 5 biggest nations that contribute to the global plastic waste. China, and then Indonesia is the second, and then Philippines and Vietnam. But it's very interesting because all those countries are here, the global south, and then all the west is coming from there, global north. Yeah. And this is, I tried to take some of the sample from Dr. Jambek. As we can see, actually, these 5 countries, these 5 biggest countries, high-income countries, contribute plastic waste per person more than developing countries. Here is the data. But when it comes to the size, China, because we know the geographic size is big, the population size is big, seems like in Indonesia, we have big size of the country, we have many population, same like the United States. So I think there's many also different points when we've been pointed out as the second marine debris polluters, like population-wise, geography-wise, and yeah. But when it comes to Indonesia is here when in terms of the plastic waste generation, very and the below. But when it comes to in the total, it will be up because the size of the country and the size of the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kirana, for that. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Could we just pop the plate over the our very high-tech shade and then welcome Sally Earthroll, who you met earlier, back to the stage, and Catherine Youngblood, who's joining us as well on this panel, which we sort of slightly antagonistically named, Is Asia to Blame? Because certainly for me, when I'm going and doing lots of talks about this issue, people at the end will kind of put their hand up and say, but hang on a minute, why are you here bothering talking to us? Surely it's Asia, that's the problem. And I hear it again and again. And I think we really need to talk about this. And that's what this panel is all about. So thank you, Kirana, for giving us a little introduction. I just want to hand the microphone over. I mean, you met Sally earlier, but she's on here because she mentioned and showed her pictures of volcanoes. She spent a lot of time living in Indonesia and has experienced firsthand. I'm also just going to pass over to Catherine so she can just introduce herself.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Catherine Youngblood, and I am a research engineer at the University of Georgia New Materials Institute in Dr. Jenna Jambek's lab. So where that 2015 paper came from that everyone says is pointing the finger at Asia, although that was not the intention. So I work with her team doing research on upstream solutions to plastic pollution. I'm also a member of the National Geographic expedition team, the Sea to Source team that we just got back from traveling along the Ganges River in India and Bangladesh. So spent a little time in Asia there, and then so that's what I'll be talking about today. Do you want me to go ahead and talk about the paper? All right. So I'll talk a little bit about the methods of the paper and why it shook out that Asia ended up at the top of the list of polluters. Yeah, so the goal of the paper was to quantify how much plastic is coming into the ocean every year. So prior to that, there had been estimates based on the amount of microplastics and macroplastics floating on the oceans of how much plastic was in the ocean. But what we didn't know was how much was going in every year from land. So that step of tying the plastic that we produce on land to what's in the ocean hadn't been done. So that was the goal of this 2015 paper. And the information that we had to do that with was country level data. So the model that the paper uses is based on plastic waste generation per capita, which, as Kirana talked about, is much higher in Western countries than in Asia. We know that waste generation is generally tied to economic development. So more developed countries with higher levels, with higher economies, more spending, tend to have a lot higher rates of waste generation. But the model also takes into account population within a 50-kilometer buffer along the coast. So it's not looking at rivers. There are other papers that have come out about that since then. But this is just sort of a rough model to look at things within 50 kilometers of the coast that we can assume are ending up in the ocean. So population density within that buffer, and in Asia and a lot of these island nations, that encompasses a large portion of their population, a lot of big coastal cities there. So it's taking into account that, and then as well as mismanaged plastic waste, which Asia has the perfect storm happening right now of having a large coastal population, having a lot of middle income countries their economies are developing very rapidly, so consumer spending is increasing a lot, and then also being in the situation where their economies have developed so rapidly that their waste management infrastructure just hasn't kept up with those yet.
And then just, I guess, a few other bits to add about Jenna Jambek, who was the lead author on this paper, who's Catherine's professor, I suppose. Yeah. Who she works with. So she actually joined us on eXXpedition Atlantic. There's a funny story about how we met that involved an Apple advert and me using her app on an advert and her not knowing about it till it broadcast to 1 million people. So it was a nice meeting. She then joined us crossing the Atlantic. This paper then came out, and it's where this statistic, 8 million tons of plastic a year goes into the ocean, comes from, that paper, which I believe now is the most widely quoted statistic on marine debris that we see anywhere. So it's an incredible, a real landmark paper. And yeah, Catherine's so lucky to be working under Jenna. And And we're going to be working with both Catherine and Jenna and Amy, also from the lab, on the Round the World Science, on a circularity assessment on land, which Catherine's going to tell the new crew all about tomorrow in her presentation. So just wanted to put that into a little bit of context. But yeah, obviously there was this huge sort of focus on roughly 50% of the plastic ending up in the ocean was coming from 5 countries in Asia, of which Indonesia is one of them, as you said, number 2, keeps getting called out at. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you talked a little bit about some of those things already, the kind of ins and outs of what we need to be thinking about to bust some of these myths. One of the other papers that you might have seen was talking about rivers in Asia. Did anyone see that one? 10 rivers in Asia was attributed to a huge proportion of ocean plastic. Sally, hi. What are some of your thoughts on, you've spent some time living in Bali, you've seen the challenges on the ground. Can you put this into a bit more context for us?
The challenges. Okay, so I moved over to live on Bali in Indonesia in 2015, and I was very much living as much as you can as someone that's coming into the country as part of the community, because I was teaching at a school that was mostly, the students were mostly Balinese or Indonesian. So I kind of really got to know more about the culture, more about people's kind of socio-economic beliefs, status, every religion, everything that kind of goes hand in hand with being really kind of welcomed, actually, is the best word to describe it, into a community. So it was really shocking also to be in such a beautiful country physically, in terms of, the natural environment, but also in terms of the kind generosity and welcoming, caring nature of the people, and the fact that the people that I met, the majority being Balinese, were incredibly aware of nature, Mother Nature, partly through the religions that they, are part of and believe in. And yet there was probably the worst amount of plastic that I've seen compared to coming from London. And that's when I said earlier, when I used to, you walk down the street, you might not necessarily notice it as much as you would do in Indonesia, but that's because we have road sweepers that come and sweep it all away and put it in the bin. And then it was that realization that away wasn't really anywhere apart from potentially in the middle of the ocean. And so it was a learning curve for me living out there. But I think what I really took away from it was actually people were so aware of their environment that when you started to speak with them about it and raise that conversation and look to solutions, actually it was almost an easier task to overcome, to get people to just start to look at changing their behaviors, even though the barriers to a lot of people in Indonesia being more of a middle income country were greater in terms of their socioeconomic status. The will of people, I would say, for the most part, in terms of the broader spectrum of society, people wanting to try and make a difference in a lot of the communities that I lived in. And I think that comes from, kind of Kirana's spoken today about, the statistics and what that might mean. It's a huge population, the 4th largest population in the world, Indonesia. So we're talking about a lot of people, and they've got an extra challenge that they're on these islands, that it's really hard to have a waste management system because, the ocean is so close. There isn't as much land to have that landfill in place and deal with it properly. And therefore, I think because it's so obvious to them, it makes it easier to implement the changes. I don't know if you agree with me, but I think there seems to be a lot more of a stronger movement in the communities that I was in. But then I also know that when I look at my Facebook feed or my Twitter feed and the algorithms that go on, I only see about plastic pollution and environmental things. So obviously it's the circles that you mix in as well. But I did mix with a bigger spectrum of society. So.
And I certainly, so the way I kind of got into plastics when I crossed the Pacific, I ended up spending a lot of time living in Tonga. now kind of completely different in terms of the scale of the country to Indonesia. I think it's about 100,000 people. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely different end of the spectrum. But I think the thing that struck me there was seeing the plastic on the ground, but then realizing that a lot of the reason that was happening is because the fisheries had collapsed because of commercial fishing pressures. And the rising sea level meant the locals couldn't actually grow food in the ground. And so this pressure on their local food source meant there was no other option than to import packaged food and drink that came from far away. And then, of course, suddenly needed this waste management issue. And I feel, it's the same in many, many places as around the world. As Sally said, here we have a waste management system where we kind of put it out of sight. And as the statistics that Kirana showed, it's out of sight. It's there. We just can't see it. I think, sorry, I can't remember what I was just about to go into. It's the lack of lunch making me pass out. So I think, though, what I was sort of trying to get at there is that it's a whole new way of thinking about these new materials. A lot of the time, in Tonga, they didn't even have a local word for rubbish. Same in Indonesia. Fascinating. Oh.
Yeah, so they do have there is a word for rubbish, which is sampah, but they don't have a word for bin. It's place for a bin, but then I guess it's place for a bed as well. So yeah, tempat sampah. So I remember finding this a little bit shocking that they didn't have their own word for bin because, traditionally the communities there have been using banana leaves, disposable items that they haven't had to consider having that waste that needed to be managed. And therefore, there's two things at play. One is the fact that this plastic product has come into this country really quite rapidly. It's cheaper. It seems more appealing. It's suddenly there. And we're talking as well, not just about plastic waste, but because of the kind of the socioeconomic barriers. I remember when I was going out from Labuan Bajo, which is on Flores, out into Komodo National Park with the dragons. In the port there, they've got tables and tables full of like small bottles, small sachets of soap, shampoo, everything. So we're talking about, not even the shampoo bottles. We're talking about those tiny sachets that actually are really difficult to recycle anyway. But they didn't really have that much of an infrastructure for waste collection at all. I did pay they did have on Bali a recycling centre, Eco Bali Recycle, which is great. And they've done a really good job at trying to bring that about. But I could access that because I could pay my 150 rupiah a month, 1,000 rupiah, sorry, 150,000 rupiah a month to have Eco Bali come and collect my recyclables. Whereas that's not available to everybody. There isn't a public facility in Indonesia or in Bali in the Banjar that I was living in where you had waste collection from the local government. You had a guy that came and collected your waste. And if you didn't want to do the recycling element, it would be 50,000 a month. But what a lot of people did is they didn't want the waste on their doorstep, so they walked down the road and dumped the waste at the end of the road. But obviously, because you're in Indonesia and you have monsoon rainfalls, when it rains, that waste just goes absolutely everywhere, including into the drain, big storm drains at the side of the roads, into the rivers and out into the sea. So it's a very complex issue. There's no one answer because there's part of it that is that very quick shift in suddenly having this project and not having the infrastructure in place to cope with it. But then there's also the mindset and the understanding that something that's been happening for ages of using the banana leaves and throwing them away and in the place that is designated for that and they disappear, suddenly having to change those behaviors in people as well is a challenge. But it's one that I think Indonesia is really striving to try and overcome, along with lots of other nations in the world. And I think even the developing nations are trying to overcome and recognizing, particularly since, for example, we are known to ship our waste abroad. And that became really to a head when China decided that it didn't want to take our waste anymore back at the beginning of last year. And then, we shifted on to Malaysia and Vietnam to try and find a place to shift our waste to. And then they turned around and went, oh, no, sorry, we're not your waste disposal site. That actually we really need to look at what we're doing in this country as well, partly because it seems morally unfair to me to shift our problem onto a different country, and a country that might have more challenges facing it to be able to deal with it. But also because if we don't do something about it in the UK, I think other countries are going to go far ahead of us and look to recycle and put systems in place to recycle the more valuable polymers, and we're going to be left with the really low grade plastic with nowhere to send it. So I think it's everybody in the world, whatever stage they're at, needs to be thinking of doing something more to try and deal with this. Obviously, we'd love to eliminate it in total waste plastic-free world, as Christine said earlier. And there are some alternatives to do that, but everything needs to be.
Great. Thank you, Sally. And it is interesting, isn't it? The countries that we tend to ship our waste to, used to, and are now looking at shipping it to, even though they don't have the populations of Indonesia, they're still at the top of the charts in terms of waste going into the ocean. So we probably do need to look to ourselves on that. I want to ask Catherine about the countries that are, the companies that are selling a lot of these products, the shampoo sachets, a lot of this single-use plastic waste that's on the ground in Indonesia. Can you tell us a little bit about where they're headquartered, where their profits might be, and sort of how the whole supply chain fits into it?
So this is sort of research that we are working on right now, and that the eXXpedition crew is going to help us with on the ground as part of our land research, which we're really excited about. So one of the things that we are doing with our circularity assessment protocol that we're developing is to start to look at material types and brands, and then trace that back up to the headquarters of where those brands are coming from, because we do know that a lot of products in these countries are not generated in the country. A lot of it's coming from other places. And so while I'm an engineer and I think infrastructure is super important, that's only part of the solution. And we definitely have to look at how these systems behind that and behind why we have plastic in the quantities that we do play into this. The paper that put Indonesia at number 2 at the top of the list, that is just a snapshot in time, really. And 20 years ago, we might have seen more Western countries at the top of the list. And, 50 years from now, we'll see a lot more African countries at the top of the list if we only address infrastructure and don't look towards the upstream systems that are impacting this plastic waste as well.
Great. And the other thing, I think for me, when I look at even like the pens that we use today for our workshop, anything like that you end up importing from Asia, and I've learned this through my work with Sky, looking at the supply chain of how you build a TV remote for a Sky TV. When they import that, 8 times the amount of material is left behind at the place it's made in waste. And it varies product to product, but that's an estimate. Not to mention the carbon emissions that we're sort of leaving behind as well. We don't export the waste and the carbon when we want to buy that thing. So it's amazing, whether it's the profits of the companies that are selling the products, or whether it's us as consumers buying products, we're actually all contributing to the waste on the ground in another part of the world that we may have never even been to. But now I want to move back to Kirana and ask you about what you sort of really want to see in the future, I suppose. What do you think the biggest need is where you come from in terms of mindset shifting, education, infrastructure, all of those? Which would you pick?
Thank you, Emily. Let's see from Indonesia perspective, definitely the country still struggling to have a economic growth. So but I hope with raising the awareness of the plastic issue and more aware with the environment, the people, especially the young people there, will have more awareness to also solving the problems. For instance, I think to see Indonesia. I mean, part of me is Indonesian citizens, and part of me also global citizen. But also interesting because Emily was mentioned also the many fabrics many product fabricated in Asian country, including Indonesia, but it's also shipping all the way to different part of the world. So when we see a plastic issue, it's also talk about the global issue, like it's all related and it's all connected by the ocean. Ocean really connecting us. I remember in 2015, actually the paper made by Dr. Jambek is really a wake up call for Indonesian government because that's started the government to alert to like it's a signal and alarm for Indonesian government to okay we need to do something. If I'm not mistaken, the methodology comes from the population under 50 kilometers of the coastal. So, and most of the population in Indonesia living in the coastal area. So absolutely many threats also around the Indonesian Ocean. But it's also like a wake up call for all of us. And I think the government also used this chance as a campaign awareness to also give a wake up call to the local people, to the nation. Like we need to do something like especially as Sally also mentioned, like we have so many biodiversity. Indonesia is located in the Coral Triangle. If you ever heard, it's only like 2% of the coral reef, but it's like they have like 75% of the world coral reef, and from seven species of turtle, 6 are Indonesia. So there's so many wildlife population in Indonesian water, and it's very ironic when our country is also contribute to the plastic, which will impact it to our biodiversity and wildlife. So this is really a wake-up call. Like, simultaneously, apart from Dr. Jambek result, there's also a research from university in the United States with University of Hasanuddin. The same year in 2015, they see the fish in Makassar in Sulawesi market, one of the market in the Sulawesi, and they found microplastic in the fish in the market. So yeah, it's really a wake-up call. But I hope that Indonesian people is also understand we may not search of the problem as well, but we need to do something. And that's why I come up with my dissertation research as well. Like, I'm curious, like, why is Indonesia being claimed as the second marine debris polluter? So that's why I did my research on the ocean plastic because I want to know more. And when I get this chance to join this eXXpedition, and Emily told me they're Dr. Jambik, really? Her name is always on my paper, like my dissertation research. How come now I can work with her? It's just, my God, really? I will tell my Indonesian government, I'm gonna work with her. So thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Have we got a question from the audience? Oh, did you ask one earlier? Deborah hasn't, sorry. Oh, did you not? Yeah. Keep it the same. Sorry, Susie. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so the German stat and that graph that Kirana showed that had a lot of Western countries at the top of the map is on per waste generation per person. And so the statistics that are used in the paper are mostly World Bank statistics, which are World Bank basically is just aggregating statistics that are self-reported from the countries. So that's where it's coming from. And yes, it's very much an estimate. The paper gives a range of 4 to 12 million metric tons going into the ocean every year. So the 8 million metric tons is just the average, but it's very much a guesstimate. It's an order of magnitude estimate for figuring out how much is going in per year. For the most part, a lot of it is government collected data, and then the government is reporting that to World Bank, or the World Bank is aggregating that government data from government reports.
Thank you all. Yes, please do. Thank you all so much for coming and chatting about that. So next up, we have got 4 spotlights on ambassadors who are going to give very quick presentations about what they've been doing since their voyage. We've actually got first up is Meg Evans, and we'll get rid of these stools now.
It's when my mum and dad are telling me off when I was little, I'd be Megan. So I noticed I was Megan on the agenda. Automatically felt like I was in trouble. So, okay. Okay. So, my name is Meg, or Megan. I even put Megan in my own slides. And I'm Education Learning Manager at the Earthwatch Institute. We are based in Oxfordshire, although we have offices all around the world. But I began my journey in relation to plastics aboard Sea Dragon. Those of you that don't know, Sea Dragon is the sailing yacht that was used before your current new kind of sailing yacht Travel Edge, I believe she's called. So my journey started with the Baltic Sea Expedition. So off I went. I've been sailing since I was very young, but I went off to the Baltic to do a research trip with Loughborough University. I was crew on board, and this was my first experience of trawling, seeing plastics in the marine environment. I mean, I've always sailed. I must have spent hours offshore sailing past all this plastic and never had a clue about it. But this was really my first insight into the issue. We then did many miles, many expeditions. This one is actually, some of you might recognize this one. This is from the Azores. So those of you on leg 1 or 2, I challenge you to find our picture. And potentially now that your yacht has changed name, or you will be able to create your own. It's tradition in the Azores to create a mural, and these go all the way down the docks. Anyway, going a little bit off topic, but through the research, we did many different trips, and my knowledge of the plastic issue started to grow, and really kind of seeing the kind of devastating impact of it everywhere we went. I mean, I remember hearing Emily speak a long time ago when we first kind of were doing these trips about how you'd never seen a trawl without a piece of plastic on. And after over 2 years of having Sea Dragon as my home, I still never saw a trawl without plastic in wherever we went. So more and more, I was just shocked at the kind of scale of this issue. So along came eXXpedition. So I was on the Caribbean leg 1 and 2. My photo is extremely blurry, sorry. But this was one of the wonderful crews in Trinidad, and we were doing a beach clean with some local groups. And I think what really stood out for me in terms of eXXpedition, and what I'm seeing so much today, is that all the other trips I did were research trips. I worked with academics, I worked with researchers from around the world, and that was wonderful. We did wonderful research that stays in its wonderful research circles and goes in wonderful research papers. But it doesn't go, at the time, it didn't go any further, and it was quite inaccessible to the general public. What eXXpedition really does is it was just as much about what was done on the boat, the research, as it was about the action on land, spreading the message, having ambassadors, people who go out there and really try and create change. And what was really special was that it wasn't just one kind of skill. We're talking about superpowers today. Everyone had a different superpower. There was artists and creators, filmmakers, there was storytellers, there was kind of material designers, there was educators. Everyone had something completely different to bring to the table. So those of you that are thinking a little bit kind of, oh God, I'm new to this plastics thing and I've signed up to a trip, it doesn't matter. You will bring your superpower to it, and that's what will really make it so special. What eXXpedition led me to do was realize that I wanted to continue the work between the kind of research and the kind of people. I wanted to be that bridge between the kind of in the communication. So I ended up then working for Earthwatch. I can't quite believe I've lived on land now for 3 whole years. It's been it's been a while. But really what we're doing, we're an environmental research institute, and we are seeking to work with the public through kind of creating knowledge, inspiring action, using citizen science as a tool to address key environmental issues, reducing pollution in water bodies, kind of freshwater, oceans, looking after our coasts, looking at kind of sustainable agriculture and loss of wildlife and habitats. Our kind of journey into plastics is kind of relatively new, but it's expanding on our freshwater global research project. It's called Plastic Rivers. We've created, I shouldn't say we, our in-house researchers have created 2 new reports looking at the top 10 polluters in freshwater river systems, and looking at how businesses could respond to microplastics. But really what I do is I take these kind of pieces of work, the research that is being done, and I have to design the learning that goes around it. So this is me getting very muddy with some children. Not looking at plastics actually here, looking at earthworms. But my job is to kind of design inspiring programs for our educators and young people in schools, working with community groups, engaging businesses, one of which is actually Essie Johnson, who we heard about earlier. So doing corporate kind of engagement programs, and then also kind of enabling scientists, working with young researchers or kind of early career researchers, I should say, and kind of giving them the tools that they need to design kind of citizen science mass participation programs in the way that kind of eXXpedition uses large communities to kind of gather this data, that's the kind of model that we work on. Now, my time on eXXpedition really kind of inspired my work. The kind of, as I said, the devastating kind of sight of this plastic can sometimes be a bit overwhelming and make you feel a little bit helpless. But taking that into my learning design and the engagement that we do is really what kind of drives me and what makes me want to work with all these different kinds of people. Also working with all the different, as I say, kind of superpowers on eXXpedition and really, really getting to know the individuals, what motivates them to want to take action for plastic, made me realize that there's no one reason why people want to take action for plastic or any environmental issue. Overall, the kind of achievement might be the same, but everyone comes from it from a different route. Everyone has different values that lead them to that point. So that's really kind of driven my understanding of the learning and kind of engagement process. So yeah, I'd like to say thank you for having me. And if any of you are interested in our work and would like to find out more, just come find me. I'll be around somewhere.
Thank you, Megan. So great to see that project happening, and a great one to get involved with, especially if you're here in the UK. And another great project to get involved with as well. In fact, I think quite a few eXXpedition ambassadors or new crew members already are. I'll pass over to Tanya and she can fill you in.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Emily's right. We've had a bit of a trade-off. I've given you some volunteers or introduced eXXpedition to some volunteers that we've had and vice versa. So we share the gain. I am an aquatic ecologist by training. I have lived most of my life working on the Thames, not that far from here. And initially as a fisheries officer, I used to do fisheries surveys up and down the tideway. For those of you who don't know, it became quite normal for me to wade around in fatbergs and sanitary plastics. I then moved to the Port of London Authority. We collect over 200 tonnes of litter every year, and that is really just scratching the surface on the estuary. We, in 2014, set out to run a campaign to ask people to take their litter home and not to allow it to enter the Thames. No one really listened. We even enrolled Paul Rose, Natural Geographic explorer, to help us. We're not really seeing a great change. There's a lot of people working on the problem. And then we started a litter forum to talk about the problem with lots of different people, academics, including those that told us that fish in the Thames were getting fibres and plastics in their stomachs, right up to Chelsea, the posh end, right down to Sheerness, which is more deprived air. Then in 2017, I came across eXXpedition and the fact that in the Round Britain route, they were coming up the Thames. So I was curious to know whether the problem we were tackling in the Thames was something that was normal, whether everybody else in the UK and around the UK was having the same issues. So Emily kindly let me join. I did both first leg, which went from Plymouth right up to the Isle of Arran, little crossover to Belfast. It was very rough. There was a lot of seasickness and a lot of science going on, but we did get some samples at least. And then I did the Edinburgh down to London. I didn't actually get to go under Tower Bridge, but the rest of the crew did, and then out and back to Plymouth. So a great deal of science was done. I learnt a lot about science I didn't understand. This is me with Holly Vint, who was our crew, setting up a rather fiddly air filter to test for plastics in what we were breathing as we went round. I actually do now do an awful lot more about air quality, as some of you in the audience might hear about on the Thames, but that was my first foray into something the less wet aspect of plastics. Met some amazing women, some amazing people around on the coastlines trying to tackle the problem. But unfortunately, the Thames was definitely the worst. If you want to know how many microbeads we found, Deborah is in the room. She counted on the way out to the estuary, and I think we lost count just beyond 100. You could physically see the different colours in the rainbows. 400, beg your pardon, 400. I was way off. So being a local, I was quite curious as to how this might be actually a worth the bad day. I wasn't quite satisfied. So I've got my own little boat, not quite as big as Sea Dragon, and certainly the water isn't quite as clear in the Thames and the Medway. And we have started a project in 2018 with one of the other ex-crew members from around Britain, Leg One, Kim. This is us in February. It was very cold. Sampling on the Medway to test the theory. And then the picture on the left-hand side is actually us going back to the same site that eXXpedition did in 2017. And again, you can just see the sample. It was full, while it has also got the algae, it was full of litter and plastics. Those plastics are now being analysed by the University of Brunel, but our volunteers, we use the same model. We get the volunteers out to do the sorting, which you guys will all get to do, and they see what they are collecting. We saw microbeads in both the estuaries. We have seen fibres in West London, which is unusual for the type of trawling, but we are getting wet white mountains in the same area. So we think that's where it's coming from. And we're also getting secondary plastics. An estuary like the Thames spits out the water 15 kilometres, it comes back in 13. So everything that's ever gone into the Thames that we haven't been able to remove is probably still in there in some part. So we think what we're finding is lots and lots of small parts. So as Emily said, you're welcome to come and join us, have a go. It's slightly smaller boat. We can only take a few of you at a time, but you are more than welcome to come and help us. As a result of this project, where the boat was being held, we found the marina was being filled with litter, just blowing in from the surrounding areas. So we set up a second project. And the second project was looking at how the litter was being allowed to go in, and we've got the community involved. We got them going and doing the litter picks. We got them trying to identify the areas, and talking about storytelling as a scientist wasn't something of my strong point. I now got very good at doing that. So they now go out, the community collect the hard plastics, we take it back and it gets recycled. So they see the value of that item rather than throwing it away. We're making litter booms out of recycled plastics that can then be recycled again. And we are getting people who didn't think they could do anything about it, including the marina manager, going out on a boat with a litter picker and getting the rubbish out of the marina. So we're starting to tell the story as what this material is and what we can do about it where others haven't. And now, now I am on telly, not as much as Emily, but I get to talk to the local media. We work in although Thames is lucky enough to have an affluent area around London, where we are in the Medway, it is a really deprived area. And a lot of people just do not understand the issues that they are facing in their local area, but it has a massive impact on them. The Medway itself is actually a heavily protected area. It has wild birds most of the year, and yet we're finding ropes in amongst the salt marsh. I told some of you in my group earlier. Actually, in and under the salt marsh, we're finding, like we found in Belfast, it bedded into the habitat that those birds need. We're also delivering in my day job, so the rest of that was all when I'm not working. In my day job, we now have a litter strategy. So all those different people that have those different facts are working together, telling those stories, sharing them between them. So the academics are talking to the NGOs, and we are all sharing that with the public. And it's making a big change. We actually now have NGOs on the Thames telling us, don't really know what to do because we're not getting any litter anymore. What do we do with all our volunteers? I think that's a good thing in my book, but we've still got a long way to go, but it's making a massive difference because we're able to tell that story. And that's what going on eXXpedition around Britain taught me how to do. Use the science to tell that story, to empower and engage people. So anything's possible. If you can dream it, then you can make it possible. If you want to get involved, those are our links, and I'm happy to take questions later. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Tanya. Oh, I love it. I remember getting that message saying, I built a manta trawl. Like, that's so great. Oh, thanks, Tanya. So next up, we've got Christine, is going to share a little bit about what she's been up to.
Thank you. So the first time I actually realized that there's a whole world below the ocean surface was when I challenged my younger brother and my cousin on who dared to walk out furthest into the ocean. I was 4 years at the time, and none of us could swim. But what happened was that I fell under, and I realized that there's a whole world here that I haven't seen before. And it's slightly different than the world we live on above. It has different colors. Everything is moving slowly. There's no sound. And at the same time, I felt some kind of safe and extremely, extremely curious. I wanted to learn more about the ocean. And since then, this pure curiosity and the passion for the ocean has shifted over to a concern. I've gone from picking seashells to picking more and more plastic. And I also realized that maybe my endlessly deep, deep passion for the ocean isn't shared with everyone. Maybe there are people out there who's not so curious and not so passionate about saving the ocean or spending time in the ocean. So I thought, how can I connect people with the ocean? How can I make people form that personal relationship and start to care about it? Because I believe that unless we have that personal relation with the ocean, we won't actually change our behavior. We won't take better care of it or be responsible to what's happening to it. And we need to look at the ocean as a friend. We need to take care of it as we do with our friends. We want to ensure that it's healthy and happy. And taking care of the ocean pretty much means taking care of each other. So this was the idea behind the company that I founded in 2015 together with my co-founders called Blue Eye Robotics. And when I was going on the first eXXpedition voyage, or the second, across the Atlantic Sea from Senegal to Brazil, I was bringing like a big version of this underwater drone with me. It was big and it was bulky and it was hard to get on board the ship. And I had to send the batteries separately because it was too dangerous to bring along with me on the flight. So that's a whole different story on how I had to negotiate to get those batteries along with me from the DHL office in the car. Anyways, I then got to test technology that can connect people to the ocean along on the eXXpedition voyage, where we had marine biologists, we had scientists and researchers on board. And this tool made it possible for us to have a look at what's on the seabed when we got to Brazil and before we left Africa. We didn't use it in the middle of the ocean because it was kind of, it's all ocean, it's all blue. What's most interesting to do with this is to check what's on the seabed. But it's a great tool to communicate and to use it for not only an inspection tool and research tool, but actually to tell the story about not only all the wonderful marine wildlife that exists in the ocean, but also the threats and the plastic and everything that doesn't belong in the ocean, which is also there. So along the way, and this, I'm sorry, but this is kind of like a mix between Norwegian and English. But you get the words, I think. You get the meaning. Along the way, we've been working together with other startups as well. One of them is a startup called Movie Mask that developed what we call a digital diving mask, making us able to really explore the ocean and feel one with the fish and the environment down there. And I brought with me the underwater drone to Australia, to the Great Barrier Reef. So this guy is called John Rumney. He's leading the science group Great Barrier Reef Legacy on the Great Barrier Reef. And one story that I want to share with you is when they went on an expedition about a year and a half ago, which was called Search for Supercorals. And they used our underwater drone and our technology to be able to dive down to an area where they hadn't been able to inspect before. And they found living and growing corals at 80 meters depth in what was actually declared the dead zone. So this is one example of how technology can give us insight and make it easier for scientists and researchers to collect data as well from areas that hasn't been accessible to us previously. This underwater drone can take us all the way down to 150 meters, and it's the same way as we use an aerial drone. You connect with your smartphone or a tablet and get live video up, which you can stream and share instantly with colleagues or friends. So it's been used by scuba divers, it's been used by the National Geographic, it's been used by harbors, shipping, aquaculture inspectors. So for many different use cases. I'm also going to bring one along when we're going to sail on leg 14 and 15 along the northern Australian coast next year. So this is more Norwegian, so I'm going to teach you a few words. Lidenskap means passion. Lagspill means collaboration and teamwork. And læring means learning. And these are keywords that are really important when we talk about some of the greatest environmental challenges, and marine plastic being the most rapidly growing of them. Because I think that unless we have the passion, the curiosity, and put the motivation behind the will to find solutions, we're not going to get there. Unless we work together as teams, unless we bring all the different, exactly what eXXpedition is doing, bringing all of the different competences and backgrounds to the table, we're not going to get there. But also the willing to learn along the way. Because the world yesterday is not the same as the world is today, and it's not the same as the world is going to be tomorrow. And when you think about it, the world is something completely different than our planet, because the planet is something that we all live on, which we need to take care of. But the world is actually based on a set of values and ideas that someone at some point came up with. And the amazing thing about that is that we can change the narrative. We can change the world by coming up with new ideas and new solutions on how it's going to look tomorrow. So today I'm working in the World Wildlife Foundation on plastic and circular economy towards the corporate sector and the sports industry, trying to make the shift over to a circular economy and trying to make the sports industry plastic smart. And I'm saying plastic smart and not plastic free because I don't believe that the sports industry are going to be plastic free ever. And the world is not going to be plastic free because we've created 9 billion tons of plastic since the 1950s. And 90% of that plastic is still in the system. And it's not going to go away anytime soon. But we can be plastic smart. And that means making sure that plastic doesn't go to waste, that we keep it in the loop, and that we create a market for recyclable plastic. So as long as plastic is used in a smart way and used where it's needed, plastic is a fantastic material. And that's something we need to keep in mind when we talk about plastic, because otherwise I'm afraid that we're going to be perceived as naive and we're going to create fronts and conflicts instead of creating, will and motivation to actually make a change. And I think that moving forward, we also need to change the narrative from talking about the problems and talking about challenges. And it's a bit like when you're driving a car. You are going to end up where you look at. And I think if we put too much focus on the problems and on the challenges, instead of talking about the solutions, about the opportunities and where we want to go, we're not going to get there. And I'm also really passionate about creating, the positive narratives for children and young people, because if they being kept, or if they keep getting stories, seeing films, reading books, and being told about how everything is going to go straight down, like we're going to be doomed if we keep on doing what we're doing, and it's not balanced with stories about how we're going to make the world change, how the ocean is going to be thriving, how the nature is going to be part of, our society, and how the world is going to look beautiful and clean in 2050, in 2100, or whatever time in the future. Unless they can imagine that happening, how on earth are they going to take an active role in making it, reality? So I think that's the responsibility that we all have, and I think we have a great platform as the eXXpedition, and I think we just need to collaborate, and I think we need to be positive and start talking about the opportunities and solutions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Christine. That was fantastic. Great insight to the underwater world. And last up in this little section, we have got the other Meg. Where is Meg Tapp? Here she is. Thank you, Meg.
Hello, everyone. A bit of deja vu for you, because I am another Meg who hates being called Megan and only gets called Megan when I'm in trouble. So, hello, everyone. I don't have any fancy slides or anything, so I am just going to walk freely, because all you're going to see is my name. First of all, let me just say what an utter privilege it is to be in a room with so many incredible people who are doing and have done incredible things. It's so humbling, and it's also so inspiring, because it's a really good reminder for me of why eXXpedition matters, because it brings together people from all walks of life who've each got a unique perspective on this critical issue. And it reminds me that change is possible because we're all working towards it, and that's really inspiring. So, just wanted to give you all a pat on the back there. I joined eXXpedition last year as a complete beginner. I'd been working in sustainability for under a year, and when I applied, I did not think I had a hope in hell of getting a place, because I'd never sailed before, and I am not a scientist. I failed one of my science exams at school pretty badly. I got 6%, so I was starting at I didn't tell you that before, did I? I wasn't starting from a terribly good position there. So I was coming into it thinking, okay, I'm starting at nothing. I'm just going to listen, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to embrace this mad experience. And it has changed my life completely. But there are two key things that I want to talk to you about. And I'm going to be terribly indulgent in one of them and talk about me. But firstly, I'm going to talk about my work. I love what I do. I have changed what I do since eXXpedition. I was previously working at my local council, and I was responsible for doing all the marketing for the waste and recycling teams. So I'd be going out to citizens, and I'd be saying to them that certain things should go in a certain bin, and that they should, be mindful of the waste that they create. And have you thought about a reusable cup? And have you thought about a reusable bag? And being that introduction to sustainability for people. And since eXXpedition, I have started a new role. I now work for a national charity called the Waste Resources Action Programme. Those of you who live in the UK I really hope you've heard of these anyway. Even if you hadn't, lie, just, massage my ego a little bit. We work on campaigns called Recycle Now and Love Food, Hate Waste. And I, in particular, work on Love Food, Hate Waste. I work in the PR team, and we encourage citizens to waste less food. And it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but the only reason I got this job is because eXXpedition gave me the confidence to go for it. Before eXXpedition, I'd had my eye on jobs at RAP before, and I thought there's absolutely no way that I can do this. It's so beyond what I'm capable of, and it's so beyond my knowledge. And going on eXXpedition and being around these incredible women and realizing it's okay if I don't know all the answers. I just need to know which questions to ask. Made me think, okay, I might not be a food waste expert, but I can at least give it a good go. And they gave me the job. And as it turns out, I love it. And I hope it's not boastful to say I think I'm a little bit good at it.
And eXXpedition gave me that boost to think that I could do it, because if you can live on a boat for 8 days, having never sailed before in your life, then maybe you can do other things as well. And it sounds counterintuitive, because having gone on this expedition to focus on plastics, I then started to work in a different field of sustainability. But I was aware of plastics already. I knew about the plastics issue, not quite to the extent of going to the North Pacific and seeing it with my own eyes, but I was aware of it. What the women I shared this experience with did for me was to open my eyes to sustainability overall. I would never in a million years have considered not eating meat. I flew everywhere. And I'll be honest, I'm going to fly in a week's time because I'm going on holiday. And I know that's terrible, but I would never have even thought about these things previously in the way that I was thinking about plastic. Whereas now I have cut out meat, and I do drive significantly less, because all the different walks of life that these women come from gave me that perspective on, well, actually, I know plastic is the thing we're here for, but have you also thought about this? And have you thought about this? And it's opened my eyes to the issue as a bigger picture, if you will, and that plastic is one bit of it. And it's so important. And that's why we're all here ultimately. We are here to tackle the scourge of plastic pollution. And it's so critical at this point. But it is one of many issues. And I think working together and having those voices that unite on that aspect, but then diverge. And it's the diversity thing we were talking about earlier. You know, talk about plastic, but also this, plastic, but also that. It means that we can, as a community of change makers, speak to people about the things that is going to capture their imagination. I've got an older brother, for instance, who was a bit shocked when I said, hey, Nate, I'm going on a boat for a week. And before that would never have even massively considered plastic generally. The other day, I had a lengthy discussion with him about Greta Thunberg and the sustainable cotton t-shirt that he'd bought, and how he felt that that was a way that he was starting to realize a little bit of what people were talking about. And plastic wasn't going to get through to him, but the sustainable cotton did. And that showed me that it's not simple and it's not easy, but there will be something that speaks to everyone. And I guess that's the thing that we've got to try to focus on a little bit. And we will come on to this a little bit later. I know we're going to talk about reaching people, but you know, that's one of the ways that I think I've changed, because before I think I was very much, you know, I've had this realization and I'm very passionate now and I know I care about this, so you should too. And really it's about broadening the conversation. And that's what eXXpedition taught me, because I was with these women who know so much about so many different things and inspired me to think differently. And the other thing that I guess I wanted to say was sort of addressing all the people who are going. You know, you're at the start of the journey. Half of us have been on our journeys and we've seen it and we've done the stuff and we've had that experience. And a lot of you in the room are going this year and next year and having the experience. I've said already, I hadn't sailed a day in my life. I flew to Vancouver and then stayed on Vancouver Island for a little while. That ferry journey was about as much sailing experience as I'd had, which is admittedly not a lot. So then to get on the boat and suddenly realize I had to live on it for 8 days, that was a real shock to my system. Luckily, I was surrounded by sailing experts and I felt so well looked after. So if any of you in the room are thinking, oh, I haven't got any sailing experience, don't worry, neither had I. And you know what? I'm still here. And I learned how to use the ropes and I learned how to manage and sleep in a teeny bunk that was actually very comfortable, and climbing over 2 different women to get into my bunk. Sorry, Nikki and Becky, for kicking you repeatedly, but you get used to it and it's amazing. And it's such a wonderful bonding experience with these women. And, you know, we've talked about it already about, you know, bonding with people and having that shared experience. And it's so remarkably true. I haven't seen some of these women since we got off the boat, and it's like no time has passed, because you have that experience that only you guys have shared. You know, only these women know what it was like being on that particular voyage with me. And it's indescribable and unbreakable in a way. And it's such an almighty privilege to be a part of eXXpedition. So if it's cold, if it's dark, if it's raining, if the boat is going all over the place, if you wake up from a nap and the curtain's at a 45-degree angle and you can't work out why, it's all going to be worth it, because it was the single best thing I ever did for myself and for my passion for this cause.
And so no matter how hard it gets, lean on your eXXpedition teammates, laugh with them, especially when it's the middle of the night and you're doing a night watch, laugh with them, keep them smiling, and they will keep you smiling in turn. And it was the friendship that I built with these women that made everything that extra bit more special, even more special than it already was. So I'm not a scientist. I can't tell you all the amazing sciencey things that some of the other women have. I'm not a sailor and I can't do that either, but I've got passion and abundance. And I think everyone in this room has that as well. So keep hold of that. And no matter what you encounter on the boat, you're going to have the time of your life. And I'm so enormously jealous. So have a fantastic time. And I cannot wait to hear how you all get on. Thank you.
Thanks, Meg. Not sure if that's made you more excited or less excited to go on the boat. So thank you so much for those. Moving on to the next section, we're actually going to cut our break because we made our lunch and break together. So we're going to keep on moving. We are going to go into our workshop for the next 40 minutes. Before we do, though, because it's a lot of the ambassadors who are going to be really leading these superpower groups that you signed up for this morning when you came in. And so this is where, as we've been talking about, throughout the day, we're just going to focus on what it is that we're brilliant at. What are we an expert at? And I think as Meg really just put in her talk then, we're all passionate about different things. And obviously eXXpedition, it's all to do with plastic and toxic pollution. But actually, this whole concept of superpowers, it's really looking for the thing that you're brilliant at and the thing that you care about. Where do they intersect? And so obviously for me, it's plastic, and that's what we're focusing on. But it works for all sorts of other things as well. What do you care about? What are you good at? Where's that sweet spot? And so this next section, we're actually just going to divide into those things we're brilliant at, so that you have a chance to get to know some of the other ambassadors and who are much more in your specialty. They can hear a little bit from you. Before we do, though, I would like to invite up on stage any ambassador that hasn't been on stage yet today as well. So come on up, Deborah, Nikki, Fiona, Anne, Katie, Leanne, Becky. Who else have I missed? Candy, Erica, and Sabrina. And then also those of you who weren't there last night, Megan and Meg times two as well. Who else wasn't there last night? Tanya. Have I missed anyone? Sorry if I have. Yeah, great. Because I just want to give you all, well, firstly, I want to introduce those who haven't been on stage, and then I want to introduce the new Blue Peter badge. It's an eXXpedition pin. You might have seen a few of us today wearing them, but they're very special pins. Just like the Blue Peter badge, you have to do quite a lot to get one. You've got to sail across a bit of an ocean to get one of these. So I did give a lot of them out last night to those who you saw earlier and who were around last night. But those who weren't, I want to pass these on. And I'm going to pass the microphone down so you can just say who you are and your leg very quickly, because then you're going to get to know everyone else.
Hi, I'm Deborah, and I was went all the way around Britain.
Hi everyone, I'm Becky, and I went on the second leg of North Pacific last year.
I'm Nikki, and I was also on North Pacific leg 2.
Hello, I'm Fiona, and I went on the Ascension in 2015.
I'm Sabrina, I was on Caribbean 2016 leg 2.
Hi, I'm Erica, and I was in the Amazon 2015.
Hi, I'm Candy, and I was in the Caribbean with Sabrina.
Hi, I'm Meg. I was on Caribbean 2016, leg 1 and 2.
I'm the other Meg. I was on North Pacific 2018 leg 2.
Tanya, Round Britain 1 and 3.
Oh, I'm gonna have to. Hello, I'm Katie, and I was on Round Britain leg 2.
Hi, Leanne, and I was on Round Britain around leg 3.
Great. Well, thank you all. So the next session is going to be led by our ambassadors and the ones you saw earlier. We're going to divide into our groups. We need to organize ourselves. Again, we've got 7 groups to divide into. So pretty much back in the sort of same little zones that we had earlier. So I've got, going to read out then each group. So the first one we've got is science. And we've got or we've got 10 minutes together, depending on how long it takes everyone to come over. Either one. All right, everyone, we're going to get started. So even if you haven't taken a seat yet, I'm just going to press on and hope your way this way. I hope you had some really brilliant discussions there. There was certainly lots of energy in the room and lots of excited chatter. So hopefully you found that session just a really useful opportunity to chat to other people like you. We often find at these sorts of events, there's so much programming, there's not enough time to just have a catch up and share on ideas. So the last little session that I want to talk about today, and originally we thought we would do a panel, and a few of the people we were hoping weren't able to make it. So what also became apparent to me throughout the day, the last panel that we did about Asia, most people who had a comment to make, well, it was a comment rather than a question. There's so much in the knowledge in the room and all sorts that everyone is ready to contribute. So I want to spend about 10 minutes talking about this topic, but rather than having lots of people sat up on stage telling you what they think, I'm just going to put this out to you to find out what you all think. This sort of theme, you know, it's stemming off so much of what we've talked about today. How we make this change, the fact that we need to be working on land, we need to be working upstream, we need to be working from every sector of society, approaching this problem from every angle. We've addressed our superpowers, we've talked about how we can work together in making those happen. But as has been pointed out a few times today, there's this sort of other step that you have to get to, where even if there is a solution, you have to actually then convince people to use it. And a lot of our superpowers, particularly if you're a communicator or an artist, those are the superpowers that help with some of that convincing. But it also depends on what type of person you are. A lot of people will be convinced by hard scientific facts as well. Hence, we need every angle. But all of us in the room, you know, today, we're all already interested in this issue. That's why we're here. What about all the people who aren't in the room today? And all the people who aren't thinking about this? How are we going to get them in the loop and really being part of the solution as well? So we can use our superpowers to do that. So I wanted to get into this theme of how do we reach the unreachables, those people that feel like they're just a little bit too far out of reach to be able to talk about this issue or to be able to get them to change. So I want to hear from you. Who are your unreachables? What is that audience? And how do you reach them? You can already see a hand go up. That's a really great idea. And the sort of like the Christmas present, the suggestive Christmas present that's very well thought through. Those sorts of things are great, as you say, to sort of pay a compliment, give a gift, something that sort of comes with a slightly alternative agenda. I like it. Yeah. Brilliant thought. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And trying to break the problem down in that process, for sure. Great. Thank you. Maria? Absolutely. Great. Yeah. of unreachables, isn't it? Yeah. Brilliant. And it's interesting, isn't it? Helping the planet often usually helps us as well. Funny correlation, isn't it? It's almost like we're part of the planet. Meg. Great, thanks, Meg. There was actually one conversation I had with Paul, isn't it? Yeah, earlier. You mentioned some unreachables to me. Hmm. Absolutely. And I want to be really mean and pick on the girl I met who worked for Procter and Gamble. I also have quite a funny story about how you reach Procter and Gamble. I was giving a talk in a international school in Bangkok, and we did a workshop with like 60 kids all cross-legged on the floor. They were about 7, and then we were talking about toothbrushes and the fact that it's too many different materials. You can't recycle it. Amazing, 7-year-olds. They like got it. And then one of them at the end put their hand up and said, "So my dad's the CEO of Procter and Gamble. Maybe I can ask him about toothbrushes." And we were all like, "Yeah." Anyway, I'd love to hear. Do you have any thoughts? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Great, thank you for that little bit of insight. We're going to go one more. Carrie. Absolutely, love it. Bit of competition. Thank you all so much. We could literally go on all night hearing all of your thoughts. But please do that. Keep going on all night. That's why we're here. I want to just do a final little wrap up though, because it is 5:15, and also look to what's next, which is this little mission. Which will be starting on Tuesday after next. So about 9 days away. Woo! So very exciting, lots of really important work to do. For those of you who will be joining us tomorrow, we have such a great opportunity to delve into the ins and outs of the science, the communication, the legacy, life on board, the very practical bits as well. Whereas today we've been focusing on the big picture of the issue and change making. And there she is last weekend on a little shakedown sail, just after we renamed SV Travel Edge. And we had to appease the sea and the wind gods by getting them really drunk and pouring far too much champagne in the water rather than in us, to get them so drunk that they forgot the old name. And so they now only remember Travel Edge and the shakedown sail. Well, it's pretty spectacular weather, so we obviously did a good job. Phew. So there's SV Travel Edge, all ready to go. And that brings us to the end of the day today. But it's been an absolute pleasure having you all here. Ambassadors, thank you so much for giving up your time today to come and share your experience and expertise and everything, your awesomeness with everybody here. And it's been such a treat to see you all. And you crew, thank you as well. And we'll be seeing much more of you tomorrow, and really, really looking forward to the journey we have together. And everybody else who's been here, sorry if we've been talking too much about being on the boat. And hopefully you've also got a huge amount out of today, just seeing what the project has been up to, and the learnings and the kind of wider issue around plastic and toxic pollution. So thank you all. A few notes that I've got here about later on, and some thank yous, really, most of all. I think first, I just want to bring up all of the eXXpedition core team onto the stage, without which none of this would actually be happening. So if Sally, Soraya, Maria, Sophie, Nikki, Michelle, and then a few other shout outs, all of you come up on the stage. I think we're missing a few. It shows that they're all obviously hard at work in the other room. So you probably haven't met everyone here, but Nikki has been busy doing social media throughout the day for us. Michelle was actually responsible for all of the artwork you can see on the walls today, and that small thing called the brand new website. And Maria is our new partnerships manager, so they've really worked so hard. And maybe if we shout Soraya and Sophie loud enough, they'll hear us. We'll have to thank them later. And then also a special thank you to Lucy. Thanks, Lucy, who without all of her work, this would not be here either. And also to our amazing team of volunteers and film team, Marsha and Cooney. Thank you so much. And Alex as well. I can't see Alex right now. He's been snapping away photos. He's gone. Oh, and there's Sophie. Everyone wave at Sophie at the back. She's our digital communications and photographer. Thank you, Sophie. And then also to those who showed up at 8 o'clock this morning to rearrange this room into lots of chairs. So Hannah and Marie and Lily and Jack, thank you all so much as well. Oh, and Soraya. Head of operations. And then lastly to Arboretum. This space has become our place of work over the last 6 months. You can usually find us in a corner, kind of on our laptops, frantically trying to plan a round the world mission. It's been fantastic to have such a good workspace. And thank you all, the whole team, for hosting us here today. As to later, we're going to wrap up now. There's time to go and have dinner, do whatever you like for a couple of hours. And then at 8 o'clock, we'll all be coming back here. It's the same entrance, team? Yep, cool, great, just checking. Same entrance when you come back at 8. And we'll have some drinks, courtesy of Seabuck Tonic, Sensor Spirits, and Bearing Ice Vodka. Easy on the vodka. There'll be drinks until they last, which we think will be the first hour or so. So don't be late. Come on and help yourself. And we've got a wonderful DJ as well, who's going to be putting on some tunes. And just a chance for everyone to let their hair down, have a bit of a dance, and get to know each other a little bit more. I'm very sad to say, I'm going to have to shoot off to Manchester right now, along with Kirsty Young, who's joining our leg one at the front here. And because BBC Breakfast have just confirmed they want us on TV tomorrow morning. Woo! So tune in at 8:50 if you're up. And then we will be getting back down for the induction day a few hours after that. Tomorrow, there's an amazing day lined up for those of you who are part of that. You all had an email from Sally. And the schedule will remain as it is. And Sally will be taking the lead to begin with. We've got fantastic lineup of all of the team parting their knowledge on all of the different parts. And then I'll join you around lunch for the second half. So we'll see you then. I think I've covered everything on my list. Anything else from the team? All good?
Emily.
Thanks, Emily. Woo.
I think we're allowed a glass of wine.
Yeah. All right, we're getting wine on the train, apparently. All right, well, thanks a lot. Have fun tonight. Keep in touch and see you all soon.